Chilio with siriustalesmoon. This is Mars hour, and this is Mercury day. Uh, Midheaven is with Mercury 27 degrees Sag, separating from the galactic center and applying to Neptune, where the ascendant is conjoining Saturn, that's about to conjoin Neptune at 29 degrees Pisces. Moon is conjoining Uranus on the degree, and that's a lovely time to go live. Venus is 8 degrees Capricorn, 1 degree away from the Sun, and Mars is at 12 degrees Capricorn. There's so many things that are arising with this Uranus moon still opposing Black Moon Lilith, and conjuncting Mercury in the midheaven. And they have to do with world wars. If we all agree that the previous world war was a boom of industrialization that was trying to basically have an ID to each and every citizen, basically creating a world map of humanity. And women's rights, for example, were given by the merit of taxing also women. But without women having the right to vote, we would not have women voting for rules that prohibit rape. And that undermines the entire, at least Standard Oil initiation, because everybody within the elite was dramatically raped so that they would be mind controlled. And it goes all the way to the monarchies. Actually, I have a argument regarding the House of Orange, and a lot of internal forces within Netherlands that don't want over globalization, particularly regarding women and fertility. And this is exactly Moon Uranus, better per se. However, this is where we have to remember that it's only because the indigenous were doing the same things. And I literally outbursted saying, wait a second, our king will keep riding bicycles to work, and all these things about hunting children, basically because the monarchy has to be in diplomatic relations with the indigenous monarchies. So all of these customs and habits that Netherlands can adapt. Netherlands, for example, has been adapting to the ocean. If we insisted on changing the nature of the ocean, so much so that we would completely fight its nature, we would be able to achieve nothing. But if we are willing to adapt to the ocean and understand that it requires a constant discussion with the ocean, not by ignoring nature of the ocean, not by trying to change or alter the nature of the ocean, but by having a discussion that we understand we're going to have to adapt and continuously work on the relationships with the ocean, and within that, having an entire country living below the water level and sustaining and thriving. And this is also where the tremendous rapes that were done to alter the nature of people and make them feel that when they're addicted to a sexuality that undermines sensual pleasure, relationship, love, thriving, freedom and safety, that they are basically being true to their nature, regardless of gender, by the way. That is definitely undermining the House of Orange, and I'm every single day in arguments about that. Okay, um, every single day, every single post, every single broadcast. However, what is the excuse for Netherlands to have a monarchy? And this is basically the claim that the monarchy helps us in diplomatic relations with other monarchies. As per the people, okay, I'm talking the language of the people. If I read comments of Dutch people in social media, and they talk about the monarchy, and some say, what do we need that? What do we need? What do we need that? But others say, well, a monarchy, it's not that lavish, but when they need to have diplomatic relations with other monarchies, then they send the monarchy, not only government, and then when we have government, then when we need to discuss other governments, then we send governments. And this allows the Netherlands to be adaptable. If the world is half monarchy, half governments, half democracy, half not, Netherlands will adapt. And so I clearly say I can argue with House of Orange about what people talk, ritual abuse, hunting children, the weird things that they do, even that are Dr. Mengele like I saw, but also in Israel. But if each and every one of these customs were taken from indigenous society, and the indigenous people don't go against their own indigenous monarchies, then my government and my monarchy would have the argument to say, okay, but how do we sustain the Netherlands when we have to deal with the whole world? If this is what the common that people accept, and they would go against the Netherlands, but not against their own indigenous monarchies, and it's not just the monarchy, it's the customs, the traditions, because even when we talk about the Christianity, think about the Vatican. When it spread its Christianity, let's say to Ireland, then they looked at the national flower and they say, oh my God, it's looking like the cross. So they adapted the Christianity to the local community. They say, oh, but there was Inquisition, but there was this, but there was that. Well, very likely these religions were forcing their own religion by cult-like religions on their own indigenous people. The Vikings were sacrificing virgins. Now, the previous World War probably did not happen because people wanted to liberate women and give them the right to vote. And yet, it was an inevitable outcome. These world wars happened with Uranus Beta per se. Netherlands has moon, the people, which is why we are susceptible to code orange. Actually, I'm learning about Netherlands under the Nazi occupation. The people they had to provide food, being criminals. And Dutch families. So when we're talking about this war, it's probably not because people want to celebrate sexual sovereignty and abolish rape. But this is the inevitable outcome, because those indigenous people, if they don't rebel against their own indigenous monarchies, then they will. If we have another apartheid today, do we need a Nelson Mandela to spend 28 years in jail until it becomes a government, not monarchy? Because he has to rebel the indigenous, and he was from monarchy family. He wouldn't be eligible to be king, but because we would have to fight the bloodline segregation within South Africa before the apartheid, before the Dutch regime. And Nelson Mandela said, okay, but these people, they bring horrible things. Also, we have horrible things. They bring the cultural display, because in my culture, some people grew in an atmosphere where they have to show, how should I say it, being cruel was supported. and and um, and then if you think about being cruel not being supported, then people grew all their lives with one upbringing that was set to eradicate that which is not cruel, or only to make that which is not cruel as a bait, and to have that which is cruel being seen as authentic. Now, both of these coping mechanisms have roots in the organic, but they wanted to accentuate one and to make people grow to believe that this is their nature, and all of their environment, they would be appreciative. The relation moon would be around, if they wanted to show, let's say that, I don't know, your mother would be proud of you, then you had to show how cruel you are. and then, and then it's instinctive. And so, but this is true. And then suddenly having unpredictable reactions around the relations. Because the desire to actually have amiable, safe, and safety, not in cruelty. But this is going to the root of basically the issue. Because if the people don't rebel their own monarchies, then it would take another Nelson Mandela who would spend another 3 decades to abolish another apartheid. That is true. And so, what my prediction, and this is also my argument to House of Orange, is basically that this war is going to be very big. But the outcome is probably not why we're not going to a world war because the big companies at stake, whether chips or oil or gas or minerals, and the alleged technologies, probably they're not after abolishing rape. Okay, but my prediction, just like the Second World War, was not after granting women the right to vote, but the outcome and the aftermath was such, and probably I would not be able to speak, not as a woman. Very likely I could be a woman, but I would have testosterone and either fake penis or Klinkfeld or something like that. Yes. And by the way, orange is color of Jupiter, but also color of second chakra, relational chakra. It is a sex chakra, but it's a relational one. And that's both the blessing and the challenge, because on a world level, is basically being able to see what is the state of the world relations. And this is why Netherlands is so strong when it comes to diplomatic relations, while staying one of the people There's a lot of resistance within Netherlands. But my prediction is either there will be some sort of great awakening that that the programming to make one look as if the undermining form of sexuality that is not allowing love, prosperity, wealth, by the way, okay, being able to relax into and so on and so forth, and would do something about that, or both the indigenous and the House of Orange will have this big bubble. It will be way bigger than World War II, way bigger, even than the Great War and World War II together. And eventually, rape will not be. Eventually, it's eradicating rape. It's also because this is what would allow to control all the world. All the world can be controlled when they are agreeing to normalize rape. All the world can be controlled when they agree to normalize rape. And it does create this great awakening. But none of the world is susceptible to being oppressed or controlled when they abolish rape. And this is why there would be so many deaths. Okay, if I go to my colleague Krasi Atasio, she talks about the prophecy of Master Bain Sabuno. Now, certain things, technological, might be, but if we haven't abolished rape, it will still remind us that we need to abolish rape. I had an argument with my mom today because Uranus is fantastic. We have eurekas when we speak with our moms. And she said, oh, if there would be company for ecological one-time use tools that we don't have to wash, it would be amazing because there is lack of water. And I said to my mom, the reason there is lack of water is because there is pollution of the water, and even the water that we will buy, if that would be in very high price, would be somewhat radioactive. I said, it's good to have ecological, to supposedly save water. Very good innovation. But there are such companies I know, but to market that in that, she saw an opportunity. It's a very good opportunity. But to market that would still not. We could be very rich, but we will not have clear water. And this is where even now women can vote. Yes, can vote against sexual boundary violation and so on and so forth. Yes, but did we really abolish rape, ritual abuse? No, they tried to make it like people would go to explore their sensuality and then find the sexual fantasies that are of enslavement. Why? Because of MK Ultra and MK Often. The people think it's their own original fantasies, and it's not. And yes, it is by going to the origin of the self. It is possible to understand what our original sense of self is, also sexually. Now, my prediction is that because it pertains to this particular part of sexual sovereignty that I talked about, we'll have to have technology, and this is Uranus better per se, that goes with nature. If I think about Netherlands, it was not by trying to change the nature of the ocean. And the ocean is the big feminine, the big yin. It's the ocean. It's that which can flood cities. So the reason why people were afraid of the feminine, and it's for such mysterious reasons almost. But if we work with that nature, which does require adaptability, then we can even live with the ocean. The women or the feminine that I'm now talking about is more like the ocean. Think about it. Humanity has managed to capture orcas. And then orcas drowned yachts. It wasn't the original nature of orcas. Aries in the 50s is ingressing to Taurus, Venus sign. So, is the reasoning for the big war to abolish rape and have a technology that is not rapey? Probably not. Is it the outcome? Absolutely yes. How many people will die? The entire world if needed be. Midheaven, Mula Nakshatra. Now, the house that gets it first and adapts to that will sustain the war. Adolf Hitler conquered all the world. And then, boom. If Rockefeller would not agree to grant women right to vote, I don't think he would be. But people were not ready to deal with the ritual abuse just yet because it's inspired by indigenous people. The first thing to understand indigenous people are people. They don't always understand that, but and because of the MK Ultra Rockefeller Standard Oil turning out of nature, then they think that what they have together in nature is like, oh, they can be cruel too. They can be supposedly apex predating themselves, but this is it is the origin, because I got to energetically encounter a lot of in these circles. If let's say you watch I don't know, a video or a picture even, then the person to whom this picture belongs, they see that you watch, which means it's a channel of conversation. For them it's information, understand how they're being perceived, and then you run into people where they see freedom differently. And I remember when I went into the get away with and so on. Oh. Okay. Then let's say a reindeer. Let's say a reindeer in Finland, I think it was. And I say car passing, waiting for the reindeer. And I'm like, can I get away with that? Ask me, Shirley, what would you want to just get away? What if you could get away with everything? What would you want to do? I'm like, me in that car watching that reindeer causing this, stopping for the reindeer. Like, oh my God, that's so fascinating. Not even being the reindeer, it's just. And I'm like, how come people's desire to get away with, or what they see as freedom, is this and not that? So, and I was going to, wait a second. If they know that they can get away with everything and be free and do be everything, then the question is, if they know that there was a process that was done on them, even as infants, that caused them, that decided for them that this is their nature. And I'm talking about Supreme Court judges, the monarchy. Okay, those scary people are the truest. I mean, allegedly. F that, Sankt Michel Nihu. Okay, if they knew that something was done on them, that decides for them what is the nature, what is the sexual fantasy they have, wouldn't they be curious about being able to, how should I say that, being able to undo that thing and decide for themselves, do they want to still get away with this, or do they want to get away with that? Because when people talk about the freedom and so on, it does pertain. If you think a conversation with, let's say, people that we would consider sex offender, is such, no. It causes us to go to our own authenticity. And this is how I'm able to speak of what I speak about, because I had to reach to my own authenticity and ask myself many, many questions, also about my nature. And I said, well, a second, if there's those things that upturn my nature, then basically the reason I'm me and not, let's say, I don't know, a sex offender, is because at the level I managed to undo certain things. And I ask myself, wouldn't those people be curious about undoing the very thing that, instead of exploring various freedom possibilities or natures, cause them to believe that this is their authentic nature, and that the switch between natures is only as predator, or not. But this is something. Again, it's something that is kind of like an open-ended question, because if there was this thing that was done, and a person said, "Oh, I'm free to be myself, to be this," but the thing that one calls self is the foundation of that is extreme trauma. Isn't that curious to see that? Wait a second. What would be if there was something that if that thing controls me, if this trauma controls me, then so much so that when I go into my authentic nature, so to say, what I orgasm about, then that thing is something that is not because it's my nature and this is what I want to do, but because there's a big trauma that's affected the nature of what I orgasm about. It's not something I was born with, it's something that happened when I was born to make me think that when I go into the realest of real, which is what makes me come, I said, that's the truth. Well, what if that is affected by that ritual? And what are the implications of that? Because let's say even in kinky society, safe and consensual, not hunting children, killing, murder, none. Then this is what extortion calls extort about. So rather than talking in language of fear, I try to think in language of love and freedom. And this is where even in kinky society, for example, sometimes they call not kink vanilla. But for my conversation with people, sometimes it was about a deeper one, about do you feel at peace when you are loved, when you are with tenderness, with vulnerability, and then it's a part of the orgasmic pleasure. And I can only say that because I know that those are immaturities in me that I had to not conquer, but look into. So when I say, oh, sexual sovereignty, not rape, no, it's not just not rape. It's also to unravel. It is basically to unravel the not rapey sexuality. But what I mean not rapey is that one asks themselves, what is my sexual nature? It's not on me to alter the sexual nature of, let's say, a man. Because, by the way, they teach that. They teach that, but they teach that so that they will get information. You think, oh, I will snitch. Or no, it's not snitching. If I would have sex, let's say, with another person, even in the astral, then information is passing through, and it's being read. And then this is why people can equate sex with death, or why people develop sex and murder fantasies, because they know that to have sex might mean that they are being murdered, because it's basically they are having the case of sex being sent to basically mingle with them and then just to deliver information and assassinate them. But this is only so because of extortion cults. Sex is not death. Okay? And now that has a lot to do with wealth, with our authentic life energy. I talked about it as an astrologer. I see charts of people. And there are a lot of rituals that people do to try to take what's not in their chart by ritual, not by, let's say, exposing themselves to another chart or to another person, but try to take almost cannibalistically. However, sometimes truly. However, first of all, that's unnecessary. And when I, as the astrologer, I would see what's in their chart, and I'm like, let's say the person is a judge. And I would say, yeah, see, big analytic abilities. That person is surgeon, that person is a big judge. And then, but people would try to do all these weird rituals to take supposedly from other people, and they take problems as well as no problem, and it causes them, and it's over nothing. And they learn, and it takes a lot for them to do that skill of doing that. So to appear as, but then I would say what a person naturally has the ability to appear as. Now, and for when they want to learn, let's say, to adopt a certain trait, a certain quality, being next to that person, being next to that quality, can, like a talisman, begin to both be able to embody that quality and also be able to be the authentic self. Now, as we go with this moon Uranus, almost to the minute, the soul hour. Those questions, I think, are a lot more interesting. And if we understand that, hey, some big business company got everybody addicted to opium, or addicted to sex, or addicted to harming children and thinking that that's their nature, so that it can extort the monarchy, so that it can do guillotine o'clock. so that it can make an entire generation drop all of the governments but the oil company behind them that's reassembling by that action. When we don't actually need oil. And I said to my mom, we don't need oil. It's like, but even your clothes that you wear were made with energy. But that energy doesn't have to be oil. I said, what? Solar, water. It's a very interesting conversation because China has completely sustainable energy and it's producing more energy than the entire Earth. And I said, my mom said to me, well, when you go to China, it's like 300 years forward. I said, it's fantastic, but the problem is the way that they regulate the citizens with using technology and so on and so forth. Is that we have this problem also in the West, but if that was not the problem, we'd say, okay, let's go to China. Now, here's the thing. One of the things that my parents said, we were talking about the past and so on and so forth, she said, when she was a child or a teenager, then she saw how it works bad for couples married not with love. She said, this wise was very important for me to marry out of love. And even though my parents divorced, it's something that really proved to be a very good decision. Now, my father is half Dutch. when he dated my mother, he wanted to advance things, I don't know. And my mother was so naive. And but she saw that he takes good care of her. So she married him, and she was very infatuated. They were both very beautiful. But he took her to a red light district to sleep. How could he say what he wanted to say? He was attracted to her. Now, yes, like many parents, there wasn't a Me Too back then. People were just not aware, even even to explain these things. And couples grow old. They stay good friends. And her daughter was extremely sensitive to particularly that thing that is missing, for the intimacy. And this is where her daughter would look into and you can understand that, having half Dutch. And my surname is Youngblood. My family had ties with the church. In fact, when my uncle was fired from the church, we began to talk about Lucifer. And and then and my own father was kind of like Jewifying, so the entire thing is kind of like unclear. And then 7 October, they weren't talking to each other. They're like, okay, I don't know. But then I'm that child that has lots of family on Beta Versailles, just kind of monarch. So you can imagine that there were, by proxy, a lot of things. And I have 9th house Scorpio, so I tend to the nature of, with Pluto in Scorpio, the nature of sexuality. And Venus in Taurus. So Mars in Scorpio, 22 Mars, 22 Taurus. And Venus in her home sign next to Sedna. So Sedna is also Venus Sedna. It's quite monarch. And this is so juxtaposed to the nature of trying to control every birth, to undermine the nature of what people think is their nature. And this is why I speak with people. If energy sees that I see, then it's a venue of communication. And I say, okay. And it could be a simulation, it could be a person presenting as their energy or whatnot, but it's a form of communication. The veil of ignorance here. And so, when I see a person say, I don't know, accused of molesting young boys. And I ask myself, okay, I can say da 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 da. Oh, there's just no problem. They have more power than me. But for this, people have to, I don't know, try to use fear tactics and say, no, you don't have to. I don't speak fear. It's not about. It's not that things I'm not afraid of. It's just like I don't come to. You don't have to threaten me. I just think, wait a second. This is happening because of some oil company that grew that person, that now is around the age of my mom. Could have been my father. And grew him to think that this is the nature, this is his nature, that he celebrates his nature. And I know all the programming is done to cause the people to do that. I say, wait a second. Because if I would say, I don't know, let's say the Deshru case, okay? I would say, yeah, it's harming children, okay? But I make the rules. I say, wait a second, you make the rules, it's true. You want to be free, authentic self. And I have to ask myself the same. What bothers me that? Because is it bothering me that I can't get away with doing that? And I understood that that's no. It's okay. So we have different sexuality. But wait a second. Isn't it because you went through such certain programming, and that programming has to do with certain oil company, so that you would live your entire life with, yeah, I can get away with, I make the rules. Fantastic. But are you free? Anything it is, but if it's addiction, there are cures for that. If it's programming, there's the programming. Can you get away? Let's say today you find out that it's not your authentic sexuality. Can you get away with celebrating your true and authentic sexuality? I say, what's my problem? This is my problem. Is the world compatible with me celebrating my true authentic sexuality? It's because I'm a one? No. If you knew that this thing would affect how you see the world, how you feel about the world, any policy that you ever designed, wouldn't you be curious to be, if you think about longevity and living too, wouldn't you be curious? People, my mom is like 70. It's 30 years, it's an entire Saturn cycle before she's 100 even. Wouldn't you be curious on how would the world look like if now that you know what you know? And could you get away with exploring that? When Neptune was trining for me, so part of the things I asked myself, what about exploring the joyous themes in life? And then get into the essence of that joy. It's like, well, there's something missing, Neptune. Now I'm in my Neptune square. And those things, of course, affected. In Israel, there was a Ministry of Health. They arrested some religious guy that was a naturopath. And they presented it. He was preparing It's true. It's not so that he was preparing dangerous, weird pills and oils and presented that as something that cures something. We have a vaccine for Chetzevet. What is this? It's not smallpox. It's um, well, people are dying from the vaccine there also, um, which I was sure that. By the way, I was sure that all vaccine actually, but oh well. Um, that would be measles. It says presented as a cure for measles. It was better than the da. And I'm like, well, if somebody wants to arrest a Dr. Mengele in Israel, all they really have to do is say, but he sells weird oils and. Now, what is more important? For us to not take a measles shot or for Dr. Mengele to be arrested? Of course, for Dr. Mengele to be arrested. This is the state of our medicine. It's also the state of our waters. So, and one big jab that I had yesterday was, wait a second, in Netherlands, we don't have a clear water for free? It's not enough of water? Because my conversation with my mom begins with that. It says, there are glaciers. How come there's not enough water? I said, Mama, they pollute. If the glaciers go down to the place that they drill oil there, they pollute there. It was like, oh, we can have a company to have these tools because they save the water. Like, didn't you just say that the glaciers? But what pollutes the water? And those completely compartmentalized, dissociated parts came into conglomerate, and we had an argument. Now, I edited my mother's book, mother's second book. No, third book. The first, I was a reader, but the second I edited. And I remember when me and my mother argued, she would be completely, really, really pissed. I can't talk to you while you bring the bad things, I'm not saying that the bad thing is the vehicle for regeneration and overcoming that bad thing. But after a while, I said, you know what? And that's, the book was very successful. And by the way, you talked about the oil. The oil companies, the Arab oil companies, which is basically standard oil, but my mother didn't know that fund the British students to do terroristic attacks. So, and later somebody tried to take the entire plot, but without the point, and plagiarize my mother's idea. I saw the book. Only first time I ran into that was in those mini free libraries in the train. And I'm saying, well, it's a good plot. It's told from my mom, but it's missing the thing. My mother can barely cross the street till today. I'm her daughter. It's 7 times worse. So, and it was my mother that had to take 2 years break from during the Me Too, because she was still watching, I don't know, minister this or minister that, and said, yeah, this lady was a whore that wanted to climb up the ladder, and so on. Meanwhile, they tried to traffic her daughter in the academia, and then was it traffic? Because what is traffic? They said that also Melania Trump was trafficked. Okay, so that is. But for me, it seems like, what is this thing? This is. Now I'm gonna have to watch the business of Manir Epstein. um, because all of those dissociations and trying to get people addicted to is so that they can control those who control decisions. And this is, and yes, and then to the people that are, let's say, homeless, they say, oh, you made bad decisions and so on and so forth. Um, but if they're also addicted, then the people will say, yes, you made bad decisions, but then they would leave them to the people that caused them to make these bad decisions, because now they can be trusted, so they can climb up the ladder. And now, now here's the thing. A cohesive, true decision that's not mind controlled in the way that, let's say, Britain got China to be addicted to opium. And now's the time where they cash in on that. Okay, they cash in now. Back then they brought Saint Michel, Michel Nigoul. um, but here's the thing. As per Standard Oil, it wasn't that bubble. Now, when people actually want equity in the global company, and this is the time where, when we talk about the Renaissance, that the clergy, they would outrule people by, and they did it to Pope Leo, by the way. They had to raise that bubble. They actually did what the Epstein to Opus Dei, and so on and so forth. It's also the Templars trying to charge the Vatican and the monarchy o'clock. By the way, when Julian Assange got up on that, he leaked that information in WikiLeaks, and I said, they work together and so on and so forth. But no. So every once in a while there's a bubble, and then the bubble pops, and then it's bad for the Templars because they're being persecuted. When somebody has to pay debt, there's a new country. Now, the monarchy itself, which means the Supreme Courts, the people that decide which is going to be the king, successions, and so on and so forth, they don't get them addicted to opium so much as they get them addicted to doing the most heinous things to children, and believing that this is their nature and that they set the rules and that they can get away, but the common simple people cannot, and so on. That makes them susceptible each and every time for guillotine o'clock. This is why I say, if we talk about longevity, and will the world understand that? I don't know. Do people play the short game to sustain on in a world that doesn't understand that? Some of them might. Can people sustain through the world that understands that? In this war, they better. If they want to be in the aftermath of the war, they better. Because John D. Rockefeller allowed women to have a right to vote, which means they began to recover from, men began to recover from PTSD, women began to recover from sexual boundary violation, and it's the same thing. Men are raped, that's why they have PTSD. And this is so. And so, if Rockefeller now abolishes the Zonetad of consortium cults, and goes and plans for sexual sovereignty, which means, and also if the Vatican, because it's also a religious thing, the courtesan setting, because the wealth of nations wasn't human trafficking, they needed to deal with that. So they need to do sex only in marriage, then to have it forbidden, then they can extort, and there were whores, and there were this. If you wanted the freedom, if you had your sexuality such that you didn't undo the rituals that were done with sexuality, and you wanted to be more free, actually in elite society it would be courtesan, because you would have more independence than espousing. I think Albina from Privileged Few mentioned that, but still, courtesan, it means that she would need to be accepting of very cool kings, and it would affect the ability to enjoy the wealth. Okay, and this is both for, regardless whether it's a perpetrator or not, and this is why if Rockefeller gets this principle and plans for this, then we would hear about the Rockefellers. They don't have to sell oil. In fact, when they dissected Standard Oil to 34 companies, he only kept gaining money. So it's not about, and also it's not about vengeance towards Standard Oil or towards the Rockefeller. It's about, hey, the world is changing. Funnily enough, the world is changing to where it's actually good for the world to change. And if we see it now, then we can mitigate. Now there will be a lot of men pissed off. These men either would have to drink very expensive water, thinking that the women wouldn't poison them and the water. Or these men would have to come to their senses. Just like they expect the women to. Yeah, women doesn't get hysteric and poison her husband when she's not safe and free. If she's not safe and free, then she gets very weird. She gets like the ocean that one cannot control. But if one has to live below the ocean level, they have to understand the ocean and accommodate. Now, those that would understand this now, they would be able to sustain the war. Those that would be insistent against it, either they would have like eurekas, or they would have to, how should I say that? They would be of the people that are the graves. The graves in the Great War, for example, they were anonymous graves. So even their legacies. Those that know that they need to deprogram, there's a shit ton of satanic ritual abuse survivors out there that have a shit ton of tools. And they don't even have to go to a therapist, because the therapist we know is the one that did it. And that's just that. Whether they're elite, not elite, survivors, not survivors. But that's the thing, and it also pertains to the oaths, because the oaths of secrecy were sustaining the extortion calls. I had an episode about this. They are all illegal, because I stated why in previous episodes. And if people are afraid to lose the wealth of nations, well, Hitler thought he could conquer the world, and you can imagine that oil and gas was within that world. And then he retired with Eva Braun, Some say outside of his body. Some say living somewhere else. I don't know.